Hello and welcome to the sophomore meeting of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club. I'm Will Acoma, a fabricator and machinist, and this is my associate, Tobias Verblinger, a industrial designer and a musician. Together we have a number of curious and exciting topics to share with you today.
Our series highlights an eclectic group of speakers' experiences and workshops across a broad range of subjects, dictated by a curatorial interest in the area of culture, design, science, technology, art, fabrication and design techniques, and lost common knowledge. Today's presentation will be video streamed on the Core 77 blog alongside any presentation materials the speakers chose to bring. Following the lecture period, there will be a question and answer session as time allows.
As attendees of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club, you are all now members, provided you adhere to our philosophy. Ex curiositas scientia. We pledge to learn without prejudice in pursuit of our mutual goal, perpetual noviceship. We admit that it is impossible to know everything about anything, and thus we remain perpetually curious and perpetually novice.
This is our flag and our mascot, Franklin. The lightning bolt represents the receipt of knowledge, the enlightenment of illumination, the resonance of truths understood. It awakens and excites us and makes us hungry for more. With that, we are pleased to announce our speaker, Blake Van Rokel, who is the owner of Kuchen and a co-founder of the successful Art and Palette Supper Club. Her menus are inspired by art and design, literature, and music, resulting in meals that are thematic and unique to the time and place of the event.
Well, thank you to Tobias and the Curiosity Club. It's an honor to be here this evening. And I look forward to sharing with you a little bit of perspective on what I have with food. Someone take my beer. With that said, where I come from a background in the arts and spent 5 years working with glass and metal, and so when I moved from that to a culinary world, I really felt it important to take that with me and not leave that behind or that process behind. And a lot of times people look at food preparation as a science, a strict structure. There's, the recipes, the math. It's something that is oftentimes closely adhered to with an absence of a creative process in mind. To some regard, there's a lot of people who will open up the fridge and cook up wonderful, amazing things. People who will go to the farmer's market and come home with gorgeous produce that completely inspires them. But for me, it's always been an interest to take it a little bit further and to really define and delineate the creative process of taste. And how do you do that? And what realm do you go into? And one of the first projects that I did was to put together a supper club called Art Palette. And with that, I coordinated with a woman named Heidi McBride, who had an art gallery here in Portland. And once a month, we would work with an artist and put an entire dinner together, an experience together with this artist. And what I did was essentially look at their work and look at their paintings and step into them and think, okay, what's going to be in my picnic basket? How am I going to be inspired by this? Where will this take me? A lot of times culture and region can inspire us with menu preparation or dishes. But what about some of the other things that are intangible? Which really, for each one of us, when we do something creative or look at a piece of art, we have our own reaction to it. And so I wanted to figure out how that translated into the food that I made. And so what was one of the first dinners that we did was with Philippe Mazad, who is a phenomenal photographer. And he does black and white photography. And definitely, I'm almost embarrassed to say with this, it was a very simple, jump from the photo to the food. And that I thought, okay, first dinner, I'm going to keep it simple. And so I created a menu that was simply black and white. I just stuck with the color theme. And so every dish that we served was black or white. And that was the menu, and what I put together was crostini with a black olive tapenade, and then it had a little bit of white aioli. And then there was another contrasting one that had a goat cheese leek mixture with a little bit of black currant on it. And then the soup was a cauliflower soup with black sea salt on it. And the main dish was some caramelized eggplant, which were sort of folded on the plate so the black was on the outside, and then a squid ink pasta that was actually a roll that had sort of a white creamy chicken thyme mixture with a white bechamel that went over the top, and some little cipollini onions that had a glaze, a white wine glaze, and dessert was panna cotta in a chocolate lace shell. And so that was sort of where I first went with this, and you'll probably see as we progress through some of these dinners how I began to be able to jump into some other places. Some of it tied to region, some of it tied to texture, some of it tied just through the inspiration of the artists and their work. And moving on, this was one of I loved doing this dinner. It was with Andy Covell of F Studio, and they make incredible work, do beautiful things with glass. So for instance, at Doug Fir, the glass reindeer that's in there is theirs, and I mean, they have work that's, you know, spread across the world. So it was really an honor for me to do this dinner, and also having come from a glass background. And so with that, I decided to play upon the themes of transparency and opacity, and how glass will reflect things, and sometimes you can see through it, sometimes you can't. And so I played upon that with the food that I made. And this was a spring pea mousse with mint, but in the center of it was sort of a clear, just a clear glaze. I hate saying the word jello because it makes me think of Bill Cosby. But that was in the middle of it. And luckily, I love to take photos of food, and so whenever I would put these menus together, I would do all of the you know, I would photograph everything, and loved how the sunlight was coming in like just at the right time, so it sort of backlit that layer there, and you could see the translucent effect of that. And so it's always interesting to put food together, I mean, for aesthetic as well as taste. And this was nice too, because Andy was really pleased with how the dinner came out, and she understood where I was going with this, and really flattered. She goes, "You really looked at my work, didn't you?" And look at that. I mean, it's just, it's so beautiful. And dessert was a orange creme brulee with a tarragon crust, and of course, I mean, you have to do creme brulee with that. It's a torch. So, I mean, you're using fire, spraying it down. And I really hoped with that it would have a little bit, I did the tarragon sugar, hoping that it would achieve some of that color, but once it melts, it melts. It's not gonna stay there. And then this was the entire meal, and some of it, you know, was either put in glass or different color patterns, which were in respect to some of the other work that she had for the show that evening. And so I would like to, with that said, do you guys think if I were to ask you to look at this image and see if that takes you anywhere, like with a meal, by any chance? Oh. Oh, that's better. Yeah. That's a lot better.
Kind of looks like a hostess snowball.
Yep.
I see grill marks.
Pardon me?
Grill marks.
Actually, you're getting close to where I went. Huh. This is an artist named Jeff Fontaine, and he welds and then paints on the pieces that he welds. He's a sculptor as well. And his work is very much of the West. It's very manly. Even though there are some things that are whimsical with it, it's very strong, angular, manly work. And so with that, I did a meal, and I called it Man Food. So of course we had meat and potatoes. And this was a really interesting piece. I liked that one. And that brought me to an appetizer that I did sort of with respect to that pattern a little bit. So this was simply taking artichoke hearts and then matchsticking them, and then you sort of bundle them up like a campfire on the plate. And then I melted Parmesan over that to hold it together. So it's sort of like an artichoke Parmesan cracker. And then it had a little bit of a lemon aioli on that. And then, of course, meat and potatoes. And I knew I had to marinate that flank steak in bourbon. So it was like a bourbon marinated flank steak, and I think I did throw some, cheese in the potatoes. And then there was cobbler for dessert. And actually I put cornmeal in the cobbler because he grew up in Texas. And I didn't know that. So when working with the artist, I would never look at their artist statements because I didn't want to cloud that with anything else that would come in and just work directly with their artwork. And the next one, this one's, good, you can see more of the relief up here. This is a woman named Eugenia Pardue, and she literally sculpts the work. So she takes the paint and she uses her fingers to create the patterns on it. And when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, first off, I'm going to have to make a meal that everybody has to eat with their hands, including dessert. Like, every bit of that is to be eaten with hands. And then it also brought me to like Sevilla, like Spain, and it evoked that region for me. So with this, I went to like texture and region, and this was a salad that was in an endive leaf, and so you could just eat it with your hands. And it had mango and cucumber and cumin and those flavors that were wrapped up in that. And then dessert, I actually made a popsicle, so you could really eat it. And it was a lime mousse popsicle, and then it was a fig Newton that had apricot and just really fun different seasonings that were in that one. And it's fun to make your own fig Newtons. It's kind of putsy, but... Well, no, it's not fun, actually.
Is it complicated?
It's not too complicated. It just takes a while. Yeah. Well, especially like with everything, I'm always making up the recipes. And I've tried to take notes on things as I go, and so I have a complete record. And unfortunately, I haven't recorded everything. So if I want to remake something, I would have to go back to ground zero to do it. And the main dish for this was, I did a chickpea flatbread, and there was, actually it says here, with pulled pork and baba ganoush and yellow split peas and squash and coriander. And so just again, like going into that region and going into those flavors. And so it's nice to be able to open something up visually that can then take you to this other place, like in a culinary realm. And this here, this was one of the hardest ones that I did. This is Justin Gorman and Caleb Freese. And they, first off, I picked this one because I love the names of their work. This one was Bed Wishes for More. And then the next one is called Puke and Rally. And they have very urban, it's very graphic, and it takes me to a place of a skateboard, but I can't, like, the skateboard doesn't bring me to a place of food at all, and so I kind of had to go into this other direction and look at these graphics and look at these patterns, and they're very asymmetrical and also very urban, which made me kind of go into Japan a little bit. It just touched upon some of that aesthetic for me. And so that's what then brought me into the food for this one. And it was a seared tuna, and these were, I think I always say it's like nigari leaves. It's like a chive, simply. It's like a chive that I wound around, and then this was a triple layer of rice, and in the middle is the black forbidden rice, and then there was some chives that were on top of that. And then it was a soup that sort of also had more of that graphic component to it. And these are 3 different kinds of potatoes. One is like a purple yam, one is a regular yam, and then there's just a regular sweet potato in that. And so they all kind of melded together for that soup. And then I decided to throw the diners and not really let them know what they were eating. So when we sent out this menu, I put this together, which wasn't successful. People like to know what they're eating, and they looked at that, and I was like, oh, it's pretty, and not when you're giving a menu to something. They don't want pretty, just write a word down and it's fine. I thought I would do that for all of them and like make people curious, but it doesn't, no. And this is like on a totally different realm. This is Jess Bronk, and her work is just like stepping into a dream. It's like a forest and a dream, and mushrooms and forest floor and fairies and oh my gosh, all of these things that you really can't see what's in front of you, you can't see what's behind you, you're just sort of floating in these paintings. And also I did find out too that she's from Wisconsin, so I was like, okay, I have to have cheese. So I incorporated, that one of the appetizers had some Dublin cheddar, and then this had, actually, this one has a little bit of Roquefort in it, and this is Swiss chard that is wrapped around polenta and pancetta, walnuts and raisins. And I also wanted to bring nuts into this, like thinking of the forest and the nuts that grow in the forest, and then also mushrooms and things like that. And then this is a duck galette that has mushrooms in it, and it's wrapped in phyllo, just to create that. And then this is a pea custard, and then just asparagus. And so that was where that went. And then dessert had maple and pecans in it, just to sort of cover that end of things. And this is Megan Greer. And she does these incredible light boxes. And you'll see that, so depending on if the light's on in the inside or if it's not, then you can see through it. Otherwise, it creates another pattern. In a way, you're getting like two pieces of art in one. And I love these. They remind me of the ocean. They remind me of being in the sea. And again, it also plays upon like what you can't see and what you can. And so with this dinner, I really looked at doing things that were of the ocean, but also how you can wrap food. And sometimes what you wrap food in is something that you can see through, and sometimes something that you can't. So these were this was a starter, and these are little rolls that are wrapped in cabbage leaves, which show a little bit of the inside, which is, it's oh my gosh, there's so many things that go into that, but it was apricot and hoisin and turkey, and then this was a seafood wonton soup. Yeah, everything, a lot of these dishes were steamed. Because a lot of foods in Asia are wrapped, and so that's sort of where I hit upon with this. And also, when I saw those light boxes showing these sea creature scenes, it reminds me of, if some of you guys have traveled a lot through China and you go into the restaurants there and you walk into the front part of it, and they're just walls that are lined with all of these tanks of seafood, and that's kind of where a little bit too of where I went with it. And then the main dish was some cod that was in a black bean sauce, and then also it was steamed in a bamboo steamer. And dessert was a ginger cake, and then there was lychee and orange sorbet. And this was the last art palette that I did, and I actually knew the artist Wesley Uni. And he had come from putting together exhibits at the zoo for a lot of the animals there, and so he was immersed in putting together these, I would say, artificial environments for an animal that some of them were going possibly to be extinct. They were there for conservation reasons, etc. And so he incorporated some of those elements into his work, and also just had this colorful whimsy about everything. It's like this whimsical artificial environment, but also very happy at the same time. And I called him my Peter Pan of the Orient. He really truly is a Peter Pan. And so that made me think of really colorful food, really bright food, and also exotic food. And so with that, this was a salad that had Asian pear and pomegranate, and then I got this pink salt, this fun pink salt called Marlborough plum salt, and sprinkled that on, and just had brightly colored lettuce. And then this, because he had a lot of scenes that sort of reminded me of the Flintstones, and that these like faux boulder rocks, And so the vegetables there are just slightly turned. You can create ovals with them, and had glazed vegetables and beans. And then, you know, I just like the little idea. This is called a le petit chou, and it's basically a little egg that's wrapped up in a cabbage leaf. And they're just adorable when you're making them, and you have all these little rolls that are sitting in the pan. They sort of look like a little baby's butt. I mean, they're just like, oh, they're cute. And so, and then that had a sauce that went over that. And the entire meal, I started actually with some seared ostrich. And because one of the paintings, I don't have it here, is of this bird that is alive, but at the same time it still has a tag on it. And it's, you know, has its little claws around the branch. And then in the background, it's all gold leaf. And so it somewhat reminds me of like Russian icon images. And it's just, it really was kind of an interesting commentary. But so with that in mind, I got some ostrich, which actually is wonderful. I like it a lot. And seared that, and then had that on, and that was like with an allspice rub. So again, there's a little bit of a touch of Asia that is infused with this, but I would say just more like traditional techniques are used when cooking it. Like this is a crepe here, but it's made in that I had, what did I have in that one? Oh, it was a pine infused crepe with a plum compote on the inside, and then I did a pearl sake sorbet to be served with that. But it's really interesting. You can get pine infused tea. It's just basically like a pine flavor mixed with sugar, and then you can throw that into different things. So I did a crepe with it. And that is my last slide. That is just something that I think we should all just play with our food. Like when it comes down to it, just play as much as you can, and see whatever inspiration can come in. Currently, right now, I'm working with a woman who's writing a book. I've done music-inspired meals where we listen to music and then see where that can go. And I also do things where we just bring a conversation to the table that maybe is a conversation in regards to sustainability, etc. One that needs to be had, but hopefully can be imbued with a good food and good environment, and something that can help lift it into a nice place. So.
Thank you. And now, if anybody has any questions, they can go ahead and ask.
I hope that was 18 minutes.
You're good. Don't worry about it. I'm really keeping tabs.
Actually, Heidi McBride was one who would select who she would decide to feature, for each dinner.
It made it seem like you were given these people and some were challenging and some weren't. So I was curious about.
I really didn't have any input, but I always liked what she picked.
Yeah.
And I know that if there was something I would have had a hard time with, I could have easily said, well, but they were all fun. Yeah.
Are you guys still doing this?
We're not. No. Heidi moved her gallery space to a new location where we can't have dinners.
Oh, okay.
So it's possible that we could do it in another location, which is something I'm still open to, or also open to working with another gallery. Definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what I was curious.
Yeah.
How many people are attending the dinner?
We could only seat 20.
Okay.
So it was a small space, but I really liked it at 20 because the artist was there, so the artist would talk about their process, and then I would talk about the food. And oftentimes, people really came away with a great experience, and also there was always something to talk about. It wasn't simply, because sometimes, I don't know if you've ever gone to supper clubs and you sit around the table and you're there eating your food and you're sitting next to strangers and you're kind of like, what are we doing? And with the art palette, you could walk around and look at art, and it helped, I think, facilitate people connecting because that was there.
Do you ever find yourself kind of inadvertently collaborating with the artist? Does that ever, on accident, do you get input from them and then start kind of working off of them, or is that it?
You know, that it's interesting because some get very conscientious of what you're doing and like to know, okay, you're making a meal that's inspired by art. What is that going to be? So actually, I collaborated the most with Justin and Caleb because I really needed to talk with them and think, okay, where is this going? And then and they were also very much foodies, so we bounced a lot of ideas off, definitely. Otherwise, I think probably just looking at the images, and then I would email menu ideas, and then it was like, okay, that's a go. Yeah.
Do you find yourself looking at a lot of art now and maybe envisioning that menu or seeing like an orange and being like, oh, that tastes like this or something?
Sometimes. I haven't, I've been sort of diving into other things right now, and so I haven't been around that much art. And so, and then when I am, I'm not in the context. So it would be nice to actually go back into that and play with it because I had so much fun with this. Yeah.
When did you first start getting into the transition between the art world and more culinary arts and whatnot?
Like
how did it happen? Did you go back to school for culinary arts, or did you do it on your own? Or?
I was running the business with the jewelry, and it was, I had the formula down. It was doing well. I had the great life. I could work about 25, 30 hours a week, my own hours, and for some reason, I got really bored. And I kept thinking, well, you can't leave something like this. This is perfect. But then I think, well, we all are allowed to change and try new things. And so I probably stuck with it maybe a year or two longer than I should have. And then I broke my neck skiing. And it was sort of a wake up. It was like, okay, well, you might as well really follow what is your true passion, because we're only here once.
Your neck skiing?
Yeah, and I should have been a paraplegic. I should have, all of these things should have happened, and I wasn't. And so that happened in March, and the following August I enrolled in a culinary program. After, I healed back up, being stuck in a brace, it was bad. And took a course at Robert Reynolds Chef Studio, which is over on Southeast 28th and Pine. And now I teach there, and it was one of those things I just walked into the space and was like, this is it. And just decided to move into another profession.
That's exciting.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad I did, definitely. I think I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like, I feel like food has the power to build community, and that's what I like about Art Palette.
Mm.
Are there other projects on your agenda, or are you continuing that vein?
Well, the newest one that I've done has been Duff Dinners, and you can read it. It's at duffdinners.com.
Okay.
And that was with a woman named Kristen Kay, who's writing a novel that's called To Catch What Falls, and it's about our conversation with the landscape, and essentially raising the question of, we're so aware in Portland of where our food comes from, but many of us are not aware of where our wood products come from. We don't really pay attention to who made that chair, to who, everything that's tied into that. So there's a couple named Peter and Pam Hayes, and they have a community-connected forest out about an hour west of Portland in the Coast Range. And it's sustainably harvested, and they're very much so looking to put together models of forestry that work for the landowner and work for the land and work for the future. And they have this adorable cabin that's on the property. It's so cute, and it's a logistical craziness to get these dinners off. But we've done 3 now, 1 in each of the seasons. And then you go for a tour in the forest and then come back. And actually just Saturday I did a dinner and did an elk stew. And it was great because there's a little wood stove in the middle of the cabin. And I had the elk stew on it, and I felt like lunch lady because people just came by with their dish, and I just got to dish it up. And that was actually...
How far away is it?
It's basically Vernonia. It's in Timber, Oregon, which Vernonia is on the north side of 26, and then Timber's on the left side. But they're basically right next to each other. And that was, let's see, that dinner was really, really fun. And that was forest inspired.
Is that 20 people also that you have over there?
We were able to fit 26 last time. Yeah. So we squeezed 26 people into the. Let's see if this will pull up. I don't know if you can see it too well. It's kind of.
Sorry for your eyes.
Nice.
It's tough because it's so different, like on my screen, and you know when you take your photos and you're like, but it could be perfect. And so that was those were ferns. This one was the one in the spring, and then I did a mousse that had this was a goat cheese mousse, and then that was a stinging nettle coulis that was on the bottom as well as the top. Wow. And that was actually, that's one of, I love that. That was like eating spring in a bite, because there's that tanginess of the nettles, and then that soft warmth of the goat cheese and the mousse. It's rich, but that one was good. And I'm trying to think of, what did I do for dessert? Oh, this was actually similar to what I did with Jeff Fontaine. It was a cobbler. And then this, trying to be inspired by salmon and everything. Those were beets. Oh, sure. Oops. Yeah. So those are beets, and then this was a little polenta bellini, and then creme fraiche, and then salmon roe on that. And then the next dinner that we did after that, we did in the summertime, we did grilled salmon on cedar plank that had like a cumin honey glaze, and oh gosh, I cooked so much that it's like, what did we make again?
When are you going to open up your own shop, Blake?
I don't want to. No, I like to go to the beach and go to some. I would do that. Definitely. Things that can still allow me flexibility in a schedule, that's really, really important. The overhead and the stress that go with, I think, having your own spot is it's just something that right now I teach, and I love doing that. I love being able to do these dinners every once in a while. I cook for some clients on a regular basis, so I get to be in the kitchen just cooking and enjoying myself and really working with food in a way that I enjoy. I wouldn't want to change that, and I'm afraid that by doing so, it would move into another place that I don't really want to go.
Have you ever found that you sort of inspired an artist? Like, has an artist ever approached you and said, "Oh wow, you really shed some light," or gave me some ideas to go with my art?
Actually, one thing that I've always wanted to do is to have a completely interactive dinner, so that while I'm cooking, there could be an artist there who's looking at what I'm doing, tasting what I'm doing, see where that maybe takes them. Also the same with music. Mm-hmm. Like, what is the sound of chocolate? Mm-hmm. What's the sound of champagne? And to have just a night of improv and creativity where food really is tied in. Because food has been dichotomous from a lot of the arts. It's its own separate entity. And right now we have all of the arts, they're cross-pollinating. Everyone is really feeding off of each other. But the culinary realm remains sort of locked in this old guard, we are here. And I find it fascinating to be able to at least try my best to bring in my background, but then coordinate with other people and bring them closer together and just see what happens. I mean, it could be a disaster. I could burn something. The music could be bad. I
mean, but you do it together.
I know. You go down together. Yep.
When you're planning for your dinners and trying to figure out your menu, how much do you fall back on your training? How much does it come into play?
That's a great question. I fall back on it all the time. It's something that it's a foundation. And it was great when I went through Robert's program. It's really definitely French and Italian based, but As he would sometimes say, the French can interpret Chinese cuisine. You don't really find Chinese interpreting French cuisine. So it's nice to be able to just have a foundation of method from which you can then move into your own direction. So I do definitely rely on it all the time. Yeah.
And you teach classes at the place that you learn.
Mm-hmm. Yep, as well as the culinary program at the Art Institute.
I want to take your class.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I also offer private classes. I did one in the summertime where we went out to Urban Growth Boundary Farms and harvested ingredients and then brought them back to Robert's Kitchen and cooked those up. And so we could really connect the dots with that kind of process, and it was really fun. But one thing I'm interested in doing is putting together a class where people can explore their creativity with food. And we're not following recipes, we're just getting ingredient, we're taking them, and you trust yourself with where to take it and where to go with it. And also maybe be able, like for some people who would be interested in getting inspiration like from another element and taking that and moving that into food and just having fun in the kitchen.
Do you know about One Pot by chance?
That sounds really familiar.
It's in Seattle. My
Yes,
dad's
yes,
from it, yeah.
yep. Mm-hmm.
That sounds like something you'd be really interested in too.
He did a collaboration here, like with Matthew Stadler of Publication Studios at Mississippi Studios, and definitely does very interesting things.
Yeah, really big on, I mean, that's what got me interested in this topic too, is the combination of music, the arts, and food.
Yeah.
To build community.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I hope to see more of it, and I love learning about things that are happening in San Francisco and New York, and I mean, a lot of people, it's interesting how what you can think of as an idea that's brewing within you is like, there are hotspots around the world where it's the same thing happening, even though there's no communication. So it's I really feel like it's something as our communities get smaller, as our communities draw closer together, as we begin to sort of appreciate the scale of community, not only within like our food production, but within just our people, our lives, that will begin to really integrate these things back in and find the commonality within all of our arts.
Okay, so we have time for one more question if there is one.
I have one. Who were typically the guests? How did you attract the people to the
You know
art
what? There
class?
was a very clear demographic that we drew from. Architects, designers, definitely I would say, yeah.
Did you attract them on purpose? I mean, did you have a mailing list? Or
Well, between Heidi and I, because Heidi also, worked with a lot of people who, and would custom bring art into their home. And a lot were probably definitely amongst Portland's creative class, for sure, that came in. And then just a wide variety. Like, I brought food people in. And then friends and family. I think my parents went to, 5 dinners.
Wow.
I think my grandmother went to one, too. Nice. And my sister. She's always going to the dinners. Yeah.
It was ticketed, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So I was wondering, okay.
Yeah, and so you make a reservation, and yeah.
All right, so
you.
thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Everyone so much for coming. Thanks,
Thank you.
So November 2nd is the next edition of the Hand-Eye Supply, and we'll feature jewelry maker and artist Erin Rose Gardner of the Opulent Projects. Yeah, so thanks again, and thanks for coming, and there's some chips and salsa and some beer, so have a little bit before you leave. All right,
Thanks,
thank you guys.
Tony. Thank you. Thank you.